Good morning, afternoon, evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm George Moss again here at allpointstv.com, and we're very glad to have you with us this afternoon. We come together every Monday from 2 o'clock to 3, and we air again on 92.1, our partner radio station, and we're very glad to have them as partners over there at 92.1 WFOV. And that program is aired, this program is aired over there on Saturdays at 12 o'clock in the afternoon. We're very happy to have all of the listeners and all of the viewers with us each week. I have just gotten back from South Africa, and I went there at a most propitious moment, because when I went there, that was the time in which there was a changing of the guard over in South Africa. They were getting rid of one of the most corrupt presidents on the continent. That was South Africa has its own Jay-Z, John. They have their own Jay-Z over there in South Africa. We have Jay-Z over here talking this nonsense about blacks don't need the money. He did an interview over here. The rapper Jay-Z did an interview with Dan Jones on CNN, who's telling black people they don't need money. This guy has $800 million, and his wife Beyonce has $600 million. I was going to say that's $1.4 billion, but you don't need money.
See, I think that's ridiculous. I mean, I can understand. Like I said before, it was Solzhenitsyn says about the Americans being too materialistic. But for a person who's sitting there on millions of dollars, like this one guy said, more money than God would need, if God needed money. Come on, I mean, it's really disingenuous to say that.
It's disingenuous, but they got their own Jay-Z over in South Africa, and that was Jacob Zuma. Jay-Z, that's their Jay-Z. And unfortunately, this was the fourth president they've had since apartheid came to an end in South Africa, and there's a looting of the treasury is going on right now, and if it's not stopped under the new president, and if he continues the same thing they've been doing over the last three presidents, they've had 5 presidents since the apartheid era came to a close, with Mandela being the first democratically elected president. If they continue this thing that they're doing over there in South Africa, then I can tell you from my own observation over the last 7 days I was there, they're on their way to Zimbabwe. So I don't know if you know the way to San Jose. That was Dionne Warwick, wasn't it? The way? Was that the song she sang?
Dionne Warwick, and I think Burt Bacharach was the composer.
That's right. Do you know the way to San Jose? Well, do you know the way to Zimbabwe? Because if they don't get off that road they're on, they're well on their way to Zimbabwe. And I saw a lot of indications of that in terms of what is happening in that beautiful country. South Africa is a beautiful country. But if they continue down the path in which they have laid, having learned nothing from history, and this is Black History Month, so we'll talk about that just a little bit at least. If they don't learn anything from history, then they're doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past, and they're not going to have a different outcome if they repeat those mistakes. And Zimbabwe is right there above South Africa, formerly Southern Rhodesia. And if they don't get their act together, the person that is in there now, because they just got rid of their own Jay-Z, they got rid of Jacob Zuma. And I didn't see, by the way, when they got rid of him, I didn't see any tears over there being shed when they threw Zuma out of there.
Now, I was going to say, I heard it on the news, and you were over there, and I said, wow, this is a fortuitous time for you to be there. You just happen to be there, because one of my college professors at U of M...
You're breaking up, John. Is there some reason why your mic is kind of breaking up?
I don't know. Maybe I'm talking not too far away, but he said that he was there at he was in Germany when the Berlin Wall fell, when they destroyed it, and he was never really sympathetic. He was sympathetic to communism, actually. But anyway, that was such a fortuitous time, and you pretty much shared that, had that similar experience. You were there when this happened.
I didn't know that there was as much turmoil in the political situation in South Africa as I found when I got there. So I was there at a very fortuitous moment. But I was going there basically because when I went there the first time in 2007, I wasn't able to see anything because, John, I was in a conference the whole time I was there. I was there 15 days in 2007. And it was a seminar that I went to. They had a number of universities sending their professors to South Africa for a study of the country. And what you do in those seminars is that you sit in these meetings all day and you listen to the bureaucrats, and they're telling you what they want you to know about the country. But this time when I went to South Africa, I went there on my own volition, and I wanted to be able to discover the country for myself. So I went to Durban, South Africa, and I was in Durban the whole 7 days. I did not know until I got there that Durban was the place where Shaka the Zulu king, had been in that area when the settlers came. But I have to say that the settlers were both Shaka and the Boers and the British, both of them coming into that environment at the same time. And this idea that the Boers would have pushed anybody off the land, that land was not in fact people at that time. And that needs to be kept in mind in South Africa as they go through this transition, because if they make the mistakes that they made in Zimbabwe, they're going to have the same outcome that Zimbabwe had under this I don't know what you want to call him, this dictator, this man who took Ian Smith's place in 1980. I'm talking about Robert Mugabe. And he took Ian Smith's place in 1980, and he became the president of the country and didn't want to leave power, hasn't left power even yet. And if they do not understand history, then South Africa is going to duplicate the mistakes that were made, not only in Zimbabwe. You know, there used to be Northern Rhodesia and Southern Rhodesia. Southern Rhodesia became Zimbabwe. Northern Rhodesia became Zambia. If they don't get their act together in South Africa right now, if this does not happen under the new president who was installed in the presidency while I was there, and I went there, John was saying just a minute ago, I went there at a time where I did not know there was that kind of political turmoil taking place in South Africa. I was aware that there are a lot of problems that South Africa has because of its political leadership, but I did not know there was a transition going on in terms of them eventually going to demand that their own Jay-Z, Jacob Zuma, step down. And he didn't go voluntarily, and he didn't go necessarily quietly, but he did go, and it was predictable that it was going to go. And I was writing back here and telling people that when I got there and I got to South Africa Saturday of last week, I had left here on Thursday. It took me 2 days of travel because I went from Flint to Chicago, then Chicago to Doha, going to the country Qatar. And then from Qatar, I went to Johannesburg, and then from Johannesburg, I went to Durban. So it's really going around it in a very circuitous manner to arrive in South Africa. Don't ask me why I did that, because the answer is always going to be the same. I went there because of the cheapest ticket I could buy, but it cost me 2 days. John, I could have gone more direct, but that's another $200 out of my pocket.
I could just see you're just admitting something that a lot of your friends are always joking with you, like how you like to pinch, how I like to pinch a penny.
Yeah, I paid for it though. I think next time I may spend that extra $200, but I went around. Here I'm going to South Africa. I could have flown directly from United States to South Africa, and rather than doing that. And I regretted to an extent because I lost 2 days in the proposition. I left here on Thursday, on the 8th of this month, and then that was left here. Supposedly left here that morning on the 8th, and then I got to the airport, and that plane that came in had technical problems. So then here I'm at the airport at that point, another so many hours. I didn't leave out of Flint until 3 o'clock, and I got to Chicago at 6. I think the flight left out of there about 8 o'clock. And then there's a 12-hour flight from Chicago to Doha. I'm in Qatar now. I'm in the Middle East. I'm going south. Look at the Middle East where Egypt is located. And I'm going from there down to the southern tip of Africa, to South Africa. And you can see that route was way out of my way. But what I'll do is to save a nickel. But I paid for it in terms of the time, 2 days of travel. And how many hours was I spending in the airport? But be that as it may, I got there at a very fortuitous time in South Africa's continuing unfolding history, and it's not going as well as a lot of people thought that it would, given the potential that South Africa has, and South Africa has tremendous potential. When I landed there, the airport is named King Shaka International Airport. King Shaka was the king of he's Zulu king. We landed in really what was KwaZulu, called Durban, which I found out when I got there. Didn't know this until I arrived and had a chance to talk to a lot of the natives that were there. I didn't know that Durban had the second largest Indian population from the subcontinent of India that's located in Asia. I didn't know that. I did know that Durban was where Mahatma Gandhi came from. The Mahatma Gandhi came from, the nonviolent agent that some people say Martin Luther King took some of his instruction from in the nonviolent movement that he had in the South during the 13 years that King led the civil rights movement from 1955 to 1968. And they say that his nonviolent strategies were pretty much composed out of the anatomy of the struggle that had taken place in India. They got India's independence in August the 15th, 1947. So I'm in that area there where Gandhi would have witnessed to the independence movement that he would later on fathom based on the struggle starting off in South Africa, where they had a large Indian population. But Gandhi recognized that the struggle for Indian independence could not go on outside of India. He had to go back to India to, in fact, fight that struggle. And he went there with his nonviolent methodologies, which King will eventually adopt. So I'm in that area where all that history is being made. As far as Shaka is concerned, Shaka, who was born in 1787, some say 1786. So to put that in context of when Shaka was born, based upon what was going on here in the United States, if Shaka was born in 1786, it would be the same time then, the same year in which you would have had the Shays Rebellion in Massachusetts here in this country. And if it's born in 1787, it would be the same year then in which the founders of this country are drawing up the Constitution of the United States. So that puts Shaka in a historical context. Shaka would have lived from 1786 or 1787 and would have died in 1828. And during that time, Shaka will be coming from a more northern part of the South African region, will come into the area not at the same time as the whites came into this area, as a matter of fact. And I don't know if a person wants me to say that or not, but that's the truth. The Boers had arrived in that part of Africa in 1652. And so when they started saying the native to South Africa, you have to be careful here, because the natives in South Africa would not just be necessarily the blacks that are there, certainly would not necessarily be the Zulus who are there. You have to talk about the Sands ethnic group, the Hottentots that are there, Bushmen they would call some of them. And so this idea that only the Europeans are interlopers in that part of Africa, then Shaka is not born until 1786 or 1787. The Boers are there in 1652. And so you have to be careful in making these broad generalizations that the interlopers are always the Europeans who come into a certain area. Because if the area is not peopled by anyone and no one made a claim to it, then the first settlers that are there in that particular region don't assume necessarily that would be the Zulu.
You know, like
Because Shaka is not until the 18th century.
P.J. O'Rourke one time, and this was like, I told you about Eat the Rich, and you're going to look that book up, but there's also, back years ago, he used to be the correspondent for Rolling Stone magazine, and he did interviews about South Africa back during the time of apartheid. And anyway, he said that he did a preface, and he talked about the Boers being in there just as long or longer than many of the the African tribes.
Yeah, Jan Van Beek.
Yeah, see, so he said that's the reason why I talked to South Africans myself, and they have this every sense of that they are every part of that land as much as any of the tribes that claim.
I agree with that.
You see, because that's a misconception, because they think the land was there, it was always occupied. For some reason, it was largely unoccupied by different tribes. Yeah,
they had not come that far. They had not come to the coast. And when Jan Van Beek and his group arrived at the coast in 1652, there were no settlers there. The West, I think they made a critical mistake, quite frankly, in terms of intervening in the affairs of South Africa, and by the way in which the transition was made there, by the intervention from the international community, where they're not intervening in other parts of Africa. There was a much better case that had been made about the intervention in the northern part of Africa, where the Arabs are, and no case had been made there. But if you go and look at northern Africa, the landscape of northern Africa is people of Arabs, and none of them are indigenous to the continent of Africa before 639, when Islam began to spread its wings and then spread across the Madrid, starting in Egypt and going across the Madrid, from Egypt to Libya to Tunisia, Tunis, Morocco, Mauritania. You just did not have any case being made against that interloping that occurred there. But in South Africa, all of a sudden, this is very disturbing what's going on there. And to have it to be unsettled the way it was not a good way to do it. And they are on a course of they're on a collision course, a disastrous course, and we've been down this path before. And one of the reasons we have to study Black history, quite frankly, is because, and really all people need to study history for the same reason, and that is to learn where people made their mistakes. In fact, there are three reasons why we study history. One is to learn history's lessons. The second reason is to emulate history's best examples. Looking at some of the historical figures and seeing the modeling that they represented while they were here, and to model their behavior in more present times, and you emulate those best examples that history has to offer us as a learning experiment. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can go back and look at these personages in history and take a lesson from what they have taught us through their example. And that's another reason why we study history. So we studied to learn history's lessons. We study history to emulate its best examples. And we also study history for a third reason. That is to, in fact, gain inspiration. To emulate its best examples and to gain inspiration from the witness that they had during their time period. You're inspired by George Washington, even if you can't sing the national anthem the right way at the basketball game. Everyone was not trying to sing the national anthem with any kind of respect. Matt, did you hear her squealing when she sang that song, John?
Who's that?
This woman that sang the national anthem at the NBA, I guess it was NBA, was it an All-Star game or something like that?
No, I didn't hear that one, no.
Yeah, she was singing the song and making a mockery of it. She claimed that she was trying to do it in it wasn't an operatic voice, it was a jazz. She was trying to do a jazz version of it. But where did that squilling come from in that part about the land of the free? And she was kind of mocking the national. It's all over the news. When I got back here, that's all I saw in the news when I came back into the country. But when I heard, so I had to go and listen to let me go listen to the song. And that was not something that in history you're going to be looking back at this moment and say, wow, that's something we ought to emulate. That's not the example. The example is to look back in history and gain inspiration from those that set a different course and model some behavior that we can in fact gain from in the future. And these persons laid down a track that we can go back over and over again and study it and say, wow, I can do that. And that's what history does. It gives us models to follow. It inspires us to a higher calling because we see what has happened in the past. And in South Africa, I see them doing that through Shaka. Now, I'm not necessarily an admirer of Shaka. I do understand Shaka. I understand why the Zulu admire Shaka because of what Shaka did as far as making the Zulu state, the nation state, one in which they can look back with tremendous admiration what Shaka achieved. Shaka, I call Shaka the Great. But everybody that you call great, whether it's Constantine the Great or Peter the Great, Alexander the Great, Catherine the Great, any of those persons that great on the name, Shaka the Great, all those persons got great on the name just means they killed a lot of people. And so Shaka did that. And he conquered groups, and he put them in his own crowd and made them part of the Zulu nation and so on and so forth, whether they wanted to or not. But he has a very bloody past, just like a lot of them have. But he's great because of what he accomplished in terms of his conquest. But Shaka was like Alexander, and Alexander was like Constantine, and all of them were like Attila.
See, my friend is a military historian, and the reason, and people say, well, do they want to concentrate like the women's suffrage movement? They want to go on about the civil rights movement. My friend says, all that's good, it's part of history, but you got to look. History's written in blood, and it's history in blood, and you can't deny that. And any group of people who say they possess this land probably took it from somebody else. The Japanese did it. The Arabs have done it time and time again to each other. The people we blurredly call the Arab people, they had distinctions between that. It's blurred to us. Yeah, right. So I mean, and the Native Americans here fought. The Dakota tribes have songs and oral histories talking about how they took and butchered the people who occupied that land before them. I mean, everybody did that because guess what? God only made so much real estate, and people are going to fight over it. And it's like, I don't see how people can dismiss that every group has actually killed somebody to be in the land they're probably in now.
Yeah, John, let me see that tablet that came down from the mountain. I think he came down for a third tablet. Moses came down with two. That's a third one. You're exactly right, though. This history where people are indigenous to the land where they are right now, that's a view that people have, that there's somebody on the earth right now who are not the inheritors of someone else's real estate, as if people are static and people do not move around. And Alice Haley had this view in terms of people going back to Africa. In order to go back to Africa, you have to first of all go there the first time. This idea of people talking about we're going back to Africa. And there are some people so confused. This is Black History Month, right? There's some people so confused. They're wearing dashikis to this movie called the Black Panther. I mean, how silly can you get? That's a movie. Can you understand that's made in Hollywood? And none of that stuff is real. They got this place, wherever that place is called in the movie. That place doesn't exist in the 53 countries, or maybe 54 now, since we got two Sudans over there, Northern Sudan and Southern Sudan. So 54 countries in Africa. There's no place over there like that place in that movie. I haven't seen it yet, but somebody called me about it this morning, asked me if I had gone to see it. What? And I had the answer, no, I just got back from South Africa, but I do intend to go and see the movie. But the people wearing dashikis in there.
When I was a kid, I always like Sanford's son, and one time Lamont, he had this interest in his African roots, so he started wearing dashiki, and he started talking about, he started going around saying Swahili words. Well, it's like, okay, since most people know that the Africans that came here are from West Africa, they didn't speak Swahili there. I mean, that was different dialects. I mean, vastly different dialects. Because I guess basically it was Bantu speaking mixed in with Arabic words and stuff like that, Swahili. Yeah. So there was a kind of a polyglot influence there.
Yeah, Kiswahili is the language in the eastern part of Africa. And this idea that Africa, in fact, that's another thing we get to deal with this month. I mean, I'm in Durban, so I knew about Shaka's. I read the books. There's a book by Kunini on Shaka, and he's making these claims that Shaka was fighting for democracy and this kind of stuff. You can write this history, but that's rewriting of the record. Shaka was Attila, just like all the rest of them were. Anybody that's a conqueror, whether it's Cochise or any of those others, if you are conquering people's land and they're not voluntarily giving it to you because they need land to live on for themselves and they want it for their group and not for your group. Anytime there's a war over the land, then whichever one comes out is Attila. And that has never been different in history. And that's the point, John, you were making just a minute ago, and I agree with you 1,000%. The history is written in blood. That is the cue, John, for the. Okay, we're going to take a break with 92.1. I want to thank you for coming to the listenership today on your station at 12 o'clock. We'll see you in 4 minutes. While they are away, we'll continue what we're doing. They'll be joining us 4 minutes from now. We're going to continue what we're doing here. What I'm trying to deal with here is to put the Black History moment, since we are now studying Black history during this month. We can study Black history any month, but it's especially designed, I guess you have to say, and it is something that we focus on a lot more during the month of February because of what Carter G. Woodson put in place in 1926. So I want to tie in my experience in South Africa with this month, and I think there's something to be said about what is happening in South Africa. Well, I was saying earlier, when I got off the plane, I arrived. Went to Johannesburg, and then we went from Johannesburg. What was it, about another 45 minutes to an hour to travel from Johannesburg to Durban. So I'm going further east in the southern part of the African continent. And when I arrived in Durban, I arrived at the King Shaka International Airport. And since I was determined to go to South Africa this time, not in workshops and conferences and not in the seminar, but to go there and see the country for myself, I decided to rent a car this time, which allowed me to drive throughout Durban and see all sides of the city, because I wanted to experience that which they give you in these textbooks, the part of South Africa that's built up and developed. But I want to go to the parts also that are not so well developed and see how they're living over there as well. So I saw it all. But when I arrived at the King Shaka. They're celebrating because it's in KwaZulu land, and they're celebrating the Zulus there. They have a large Zulu population there. In fact, the Zulus are the largest population. The largest ethnic group in South Africa is the Zulu group. And you arrive at the King Shaka International Airport. When I was leaving the airport, going to my my own villa, I saw one of the signs that was a turnoff point, exit point for the Nandi Medical Center, and I knew that medical center was named after Shaka's mother, and so they are celebrating the Zulu. They are celebrating Shaka, as they should. But I can tell you that those that are not Zulu do not celebrate that history, because it's not their own history. Although the blacks are you can have the blacks, but the blacks are not celebrating Zulu history. They're celebrating the history of their own ethnic group. For example, the Nelson Mandela, who was born in 1918, and that's another reason why I was there at a propitious moment, and that was Mandela's centenary year is this year. Mandela was born in 1918, and I just happened to go there, and a lot of it just kind of happened. I wasn't planning it this way, but that was the centenary year of Mandela's birth, and so they were kind of reflecting on Mandela because he was born in 1918, and this is 2018, so 100 years ago was Mandela's birth. And I have to tell you something else. I know people are not going to like me saying this, but I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm not necessarily a fan of Mandela either. And we just have to understand history a lot better than we do. But Mandela, see, this is a month now. We're talking about Black History Month. We're back with the other members of our audience. Our listening audience is back, and they can hear the program. They're not going to be able to see it as those who are with us at All Points TV will be able to do, but they'll be able to hear the rest of the program, and all of you can pick it up on YouTube at your leisure. But I'm not necessarily a fan of Nelson Mandela. See, I'm not politically correct. That's why I guess Facebook had to get me off there. because I'm not one of those persons that you can just tell anything to, and then that's going to be the going rate based upon somebody else's point of view. And most persons that disagree with what I'm saying disagree because they have the herd, point of view.
I think most people have this tendency to have this very naive sense that somebody who's done good is always going to be good, always going to be doing good, never done anything wrong. But sometimes it takes some very bad acts to do some good. So it's a mixed bag. Yeah. Humans are a mixed bag. Nelson Mandela, from my view of him, my examination of him, he's a mixed bag. I mean, his wife certainly, Winnie, became very corrupt, very brutal. But so I mean, it's like a mixed bag. I mean, George Washington or all the founders were great men of want to break away and have freedom from England, but they own slaves. So that's always used to hang them with that. So I mean, but everybody's a mixed bag.
Yeah, it's a mixed bag with Mandela, but Mandela Mandela is celebrated for the wrong reasons. And I mean, coming out of jail and becoming president, that's not. I don't understand how that can be celebrated. That because he spent 27 years in jail, now he is prepared to run a nation, and that is enough background in order to be able to be a great administrator over the country. Now, I give him credit for this. He did get in there in 1994, having been elected in 1994, and stepped down after one term. So he did a George Washington type thing there. And I think George Washington would have to be the example that he was following in terms of stepping down from power. That's a good thing, because it makes it harder for a dictator to come after him and do what the founding black president didn't do. Just like it'd be very hard to set up a dictatorial government in this country when the founder of the country did not, in fact, disabuse the office of the presidency by trying to run as a king and stay in power forever, which is a mistake that a lot of people in Africa made. Where George Washington stepping down and was the father of the country, he set a precedent. And you didn't even need a law to be passed until the 1950s to maintain the 2 terms of the president. It wasn't until 1951 under Truman that you had the 22nd Amendment added to the Constitution that made it mandatory that a person would only serve 2 terms, because it had not been broken until Roosevelt did it in 1940. That's because of the example set by George Washington. And Mandela did that. I give Mandela great credit for that. But let's understand something about Mandela that nobody's talking about. And I would compare Mandela and that in terms of that legacy with that of Malcolm X. Mandela lived beyond his iconic place in history. Malcolm did not do that. In other words, the reason why Malcolm remains an iconic figure is because Malcolm did not transcend the time of his iconic witness in the historical record. In other words, he did not live long enough to discredit himself.
As the Greeks would call that hubris. He didn't meet with hubris.
Exactly, right. John. See, Mandela's the role that Mandela played as a great historical figure was the person that was incarcerated in that jail cell for 27 years that allowed the South African people to unite around the fact of his incarceration. Everybody was looking at Nelson Mandela's incarceration and his witness and gaining inspiration from that. But Mandela lived beyond that time. And when he came out of the jail, all the ones that coalesced around his imprisonment, when he came out of the jail, Mandela wouldn't even speak to them.
Could you imagine Alexander the Great, after he conquered the world, if he hadn't died young? And if he lived to be old age and they saw him weakening and becoming maybe senile or incontinent or whatever, and they having that recorded in history, it would just, okay, he was a flesh and blood person, obviously. But let's face it, he'd served better of being an icon, meeting the death that he did at that age.
That's right. We still remember him right now. How many of the persons underneath him do we remember? And don't forget, when you are an iconic figure, if you live beyond the point of your iconic witness in history, then your legacy is in fact lessened. How many presidents have we had in this country, for example? And how many of them can you recall? I bet you not more than 5, and probably 2 that come to mind more than the others. George Washington, the first president. I know everybody knows the 16th president. Name the others. And on Mount Rushmore, we've had, at the time that Mount Rushmore was created in 1925, when Calvin Coolidge was president, the only presidents on Mount Rushmore in South Dakota are 4 presidents, and really 3 of them need to get off there. The only one that belongs up there on Mount Rushmore is George Washington. The rest of the presidents don't belong up there. They put them up there as a way of filling in some space. What is Theodore Roosevelt doing up there, John?
I don't know. Another thing is, I think Coolidge should be worthy of more mention than he is.
Much more.
Because he was more of an administrator, which the president is supposed to be, not trying to be this like great grand figure leading the country like it's become. It's become like a cult of personality, you know.
Calvin Coolidge would never be considered great because he was not an interventionist, but that's what a president was supposed to do. Manage the country, not run it, and not run it down. Coolidge was a hands-off president. You can go read Slade's book, Shales. She wrote some great. She has a book out called The Forgotten Man. That book should be read. And she wrote a book on Calvin Coolidge, which is a Bible on Calvin Coolidge. Somebody should read about Coolidge. Coolidge was a great president, but he would never be acknowledged as being great because he was not an interventionist. And because he kept his hands off of things he should have kept his hands off of based upon the Constitution, they're not going to credit him. They want somebody like Roosevelt that was doing all kinds of things that were against the Constitution. And he was such a great president, why was it that after he died in office, after being elected to 4 terms, why they rushed to, in fact, make sure that Roosevelt wouldn't happen again? Why did they limit the president's terms after Roosevelt, but they didn't limit the terms of the members of the House of Representatives? And they didn't limit the number of terms that a person could run in the Senate. Why did they limit the president's term? Because of Roosevelt. And they're talking about how great he was. They got him up there as the second greatest president we had and all that kind of thing. Roosevelt wasn't a great president. He was an interventionist. He was an anti-constitutional president. Should have impeached him. And but anyway, you get away from history and you start making these mockery of the record, and you don't emulate the best examples because they're lying about what their witness was when they lived. Roosevelt was not a person to be admired for the things that he did. And a lot of the problems we're having in this country right now can go back to the New Deal. Go read the book by this professor at Hillsdale College, Fulton's book. Let's see, what's Fulton's book? He mentioned something. It's something like the New Deal. I forget the name of it now, but it's a book that talks about the New Deal from another standpoint. And Fulton is talking about the real deal that was taking place on the New Deal. It's similar to what Flynn wrote about.
I was going to say Flynn's book's really available because I bought a couple of copies myself.
Yeah, what's Flynn's book called again? Because
the FDR myth.
Yeah, the FDR myth. That's right. Yeah. The FDR myth. The real FDR has gotten lost in history, and we have to be very careful here and to go back and recapture the real historical record. Now, I was making this point that Malcolm died at the apex of his ideas, and so he did not outlive his legendary role in history. He's talking about Pan-Africanism, and he was a proponent of that, and he died before the Pan-Africanist idea began to unravel, because in 1965 when Malcolm X was killed on February the 21st, 1965, the following year, the one that was running the Pan-Africanist idea and was in the forefront of it was overthrown in the following year, in 1966. Malcolm wasn't here to see that. We don't know how Malcolm would have responded when the things that he was actually standing up for began to unravel, because he wasn't here to witness that. So he did not outlive his legend that we now respond to, because he died before his ideas began to become unraveled, because what you began to happen with the overthrow of Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana, and Kwame Nkrumah had been educated here in the United States for 10 years, from 1935 to 1945, And he'd run into some people like W.B. Du Bois here, and had run into Paul Robeson, who was at Lincoln University, and had gotten some in contact with some of the works of Marcus Garvey, and carried all these ideas. First of all, he went to England, where he went there for 2 years. He was here from 35 to 45. Then Kwame Nkrumah went from 45 to 47 in England, where he was put in contact with the great George Padmore, who was over there, who took him under his wings. And then from there, they invited Nkrumah to come back home to, at that point, the Gold Coast. And when they gained the independence in 1957, had been promised in 1954, but they actually gained the independence in 1957. When Nkrumah went back home, he went back home with the Pan-African idea, which he gotten out of the West. But a couple of failures occurred, and when he tried to modernize Ghana a little too quickly, and then take the steps to bring about modernization, building the Akosombo Dam because of the water, the Volta River there. He's going to collect that energy, which is a good idea. But Nkrumah was a visionary, but he wasn't a scientist. He didn't have the scientific wherewithal to make those decisions. I mean, it's one thing to have a vision of what ought to happen. There's another thing to have the skills to make it happen. And when they used that Akosombo Dam to run that current through the old technology, he blew those transformers out. In other words, Nkrumah had the idea of using the Akosombo Dam for hydroelectric energy, but he didn't have the Western skills to bring that about. Just because you have an idea doesn't mean you can make the idea work. And when that happened, it wasn't within a year that they overthrew Nkrumah. They had enough of Nkrumah. Because first of all, they didn't understand his Pan-African idea, which he had gotten out of the West, and now he's over there fumbling around with the economy, and that wasn't working, and so he's overthrown. Malcolm died before that occurred. So his iconic status will always be there. But Mandela came out of prison, which was a point of rallying around Mandela. And when he got out of prison, having all the people in South Africa uniting around his incarceration, when he came out, he wouldn't speak to anybody. Gasha Buthelezi was the head of the Zulu, the largest ethnic group in South Africa. Mandela wouldn't even talk to him. And I remember when Mandela came here, I was down there when he came to Detroit. He made a tour of the West because he was celebrating, everybody was celebrating Mandela. And I understand that. I was celebrating Mandela's release also. But I was not getting carried away with it. I went down to hear him when he came down to, where was that? Was it the Detroit Stadium? I think it was Detroit. I think it was Detroit Baseball Stadium, if I recall correctly.
Tiger Stadium, you mean, or?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so I remember that was like in the late 80s, 80s.
No, it was 90. 90? Mandela got it in 90, 91.
Okay, so I've kind of blurred together because I remember apartheid was a huge thing in the news.
Yeah.
And then it faded, and it ended,
And that's been blown up out of proportion also. Okay, don't get me started on that, but I'm just telling you that there's a lot of history. We have got to be able to be better at understanding the historical record. Mandela came out of prison. Now everybody had coalesced around Mandela's incarceration, and when he gets out of prison, all the ones that were there were different ethnic groups. It wasn't just the Hausa group that Mandela belongs to. It was a lot of these groups. But when Mandela got out, he wants to go identify only with the Hausa. He was a rallying cry for the other groups too. And got out of there. He wouldn't talk to Gasha Buthelezi. And when he was making his tour of the United States, I saw him on Nightline, and Gasha Buthelezi called from South Africa to the program on Nightline. And he said to him, I can remember like it was yesterday, he said, "My brother, I've been calling and calling, and you won't return my phone calls." And here's what Mandela said. Mandela said this to him. He said, "Brother, you know that the answer is no longer simple." And he chastised Gasha Buthelezi for talking to him on foreign soil about this dispute. Mandela saw it as a national conversation, and here they were talking about it across international boundaries. He told him that, and you would call when I'm on foreign soil, but he wouldn't talk to him in South Africa. So what he's supposed to do? But Mandela was telling him that he was a disciplined member of the ANC, the African National Congress, which was set up in 1912. And what Mandela was saying in cold words was the same thing that I heard over in South Africa when I was there this past week, where Jay-Z, not the one that's a singer, the rapper and all of that, with $800 million telling us money don't matter. And it doesn't matter if you got some, but if you don't have it, it matters 100%. Because the world operates on money, and don't let anybody fool you about that. If you don't have money, you know, what's that song? It's money, honey. Money, honey. You gotta have some money if you want to talk to me. So money is the going rate. If you when I was in South Africa, if I want to say thank you, I say it with money. They don't hear me talking about thank you and go up there and shake their hand. When I arrived at the airport, there's a person out there playing the guitar. He had his hat down there on the don't forget his hat down there, turned upwards. That means throw some coins in there. He ain't just playing because of your musical pledge. That guy's trying to get some money to feed his family that day. He's working. So when you say that money doesn't matter, that's how Jay-Z over here, and they got a Jay-Z over there. He's equally as crazy as our Jay-Z is over here. Jacob Zuma, they threw him out of there, and he didn't want to leave. But I heard him say the same thing that Mandela said. When Mandela came out, he said that he's a disciplined member of the ANC. And what Jacob Zuma was saying, as they were forcing him out of office 1 year before his time runs out, he's not really due to leave office, wasn't due to leave office until 2019. But the ANC forced Zuma out of office. He's the second one they forced out of office. Did the same thing to Mbeki. And they didn't force him out because they were upset with his corruption. They knew he was corrupt before he got in there. They forced him out because the ANC, I'm just telling you the truth here, the ANC think of themselves as owning South Africa. Their idea is that they were there in the forefront of the fighting to end apartheid, and therefore it's their time to eat. That's how they see it. And so, because Zuma had gotten so so unpopular in South Africa, it was clear that when that election comes up, they're not voting for ANC, because they're going to vote against anyone that the ANC puts up there. So the ANC, the African National Congress, intervened and told Zuma that he had to leave. It was really kind of an anti-constitutional move against Zuma. I mean, nobody was crying over that he left.
Now, what kind of constitution does South Africa have? Was it one that they created, or was it one that they basically followed from the Dutch or the English?
It's the same constitution they had. Some tweaking that occurred because you had more vote. You had the voters now. You had the majority voting for the first time in the election of 1994 when Mandela was elected. But they used if they had invoked Article 50 of the Constitution, that would have been the impeachment process. But no, they went to they went to Jacob Zuma, and they told him, as the ANC, of which he was a member of, that he had to step down. If he had not stepped down, there's going to be some problems there. What they would have done there is they would have brought charges against Zuma, because Zuma's just like the rest of them. He's a crook. Jacob Zuma was using the Treasury as his private, a bank account, using the money to refurnish his home and renovate his mansion that he had bought. You know how they all of a sudden come in money when they're in politics. and Zuma was no different. But they weren't upset with Jacob Zuma's corruption. They knew Zuma was corrupt when they put him in there. The man Zuma had been accused of rape in 2005. People go back and look at the record and see this man was accused of raping a woman that was HIV positive in 2005. And then they gave him an O.J. Simpson type trial or a Michael Jackson type trial, where everybody's stereo-eyed and they can't see the evidence. You can take that any way you want to. I'm saying it because that's the truth. They dismissed the evidence against him. And then after he got off in 2006 when they had the trial, Zuma announced he was back. And then he made this apology. He apologized to the people, not for the sexual act and probably having forced a person to engage with him that was HIV positive. You know what he apologized for? To show you the kind of man he is. Apologized for not using any protection. And the people bought that. Part of the problem with these politicians are the people that they govern. It's amazing how people, you have to know history, not to fall in these minefields. History teaches us a lesson. If you don't know the historical record, you make these mistakes, and they're making a lot of mistakes in South Africa. A lot of mistakes. And I'm not just talking about the mistake of going down the same road with Zimbabwe. We've been here before. Go look at Haiti. If you want to read a book about what that is about and why Haiti is in the trouble it's in, go read the book written by Charles Adams called In the Course of Human Events. Because I know all of the scholars, they would want to talk about the three persons that initiated the revolution in Haiti in 1791, because they were emulating the revolution they had in France when France was fighting a revolutionary war over equality and fraternity and what's the other one? Fraternity, equality, equality meaning equality, fraternity, brotherhood, and so on. And the people in what was France's greatest colony, which was Haiti, saw the revolution there, and they sent their representatives over there to say that we want some of this freedom also. And they sent Ogi and Chavannes over there to the French Parliament to ask for that. And when they did not get what they were asking for, then the Haitians rose up. But the mistake that they made was that when they rose up, and we celebrate the rising up under not Toussaint Louverture at the beginning.
By the way, it was liberty, equality, and fraternity.
That's it.
Yeah.
Liberté, fraternity, and
liberté, equality, and fraternity.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Liberté, égalité. I say égalité because that's the way it is in French, and fraternity. So they're fighting this war in France over that. Of course, you know that France had the guillotine out, and no head was safe during that time period as they went through the French Revolution. Very different than the revolution here. And Cote has a very good book about those two revolutions. The American Revolution, where when the revolution was over and we had a peace treaty signed in 1783, then no heads rolled after that was over. That's another part of the greatness of the revolution in the United States, and another part of the greatness of George Washington. A lot to celebrate here. And when you sing that national anthem at these basketball games, get it straight for a change. And stop that hollering in that song. That was no jazz, that was mockery. And they caught you at it. Now she's up here apologizing. John, you have to go and see it. She's now apologizing for it because they caught her in a mockery. And all you kneelers, they're kneeling when they play the national anthem, you're another bunch of buffoons. Because you got to go and read about Kearney, who fought in the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, and Kearney was given one of the first blacks to get the Purple Heart for his bravery because that flag never hit the ground as they were trying to take a fort that was impregnable. They never took Fort Wagner during the so-called Civil War. But that flag never hit the ground because they respected that flag at that time. And it was after that war came to a close that they changed the tune that had been sang by Frederick Douglass. You know, Douglass was sang in 1852. When they were celebrating the 4th of July, Frederick Douglass said appropriately, "What is your 4th of July to me?" But that was in 1852. When the war came to a close, blacks are singing "My Country, 'Tis of Thee." And they're singing it because the narrative in Black America had changed, because their condition had changed. And these persons up here are making $2.4 million on the average a year, playing football, catching a ball, and then down here on their knees, disrespecting the flag that black people fought for and made possible. It's because they don't know history. And if you don't study it, you make a lot of mistakes. And that's what I saw going on in South Africa. You have got to understand the path that you're on, and you got to go look in Haiti, because Haiti has never recovered. 200 years later, Haiti is the poorest of the colonies. It was once the wealthiest colony in the British Empire, in the French Empire. They don't have that anymore. And it's because they destroyed their artisan class, and they're doing that in South Africa. And I saw it with my own eyes when I was there. This is Black History Month. Get a book in your hand and read something. Until next time, want you to follow your dream. Because if you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.